So in this lesson we're going to discuss Xcode a little bit more. In the last lesson we built a quick application. We called it Scores or Quick Sports. And in that application we made some simple screens. We created a menu screen that had baseball, football, and basketball. And each of these screens loaded a URL to the mobile websites. So then we downloaded the project source code from our control panel. And we unzipped this archive that we downloaded. And we exposed all of the project files. The next thing we did is we opened up the Xcode project in the Xcode environment. And when we opened up the Xcode environment, we used Xcode to compile the application into an actual app that we installed on the simulator. So in this lesson we're going to discuss Xcode a little bit more and what it does. So the whole purpose of Xcode, the fundamental purpose about Xcode is a compiler that compiles project resources, files and images and things like that, into an application. And that application is one file that gets installed on the device. So another way to say that, and a way to simplify that idea is Xcode is a compiler. However, lots of different things can be done inside of the Xcode environment, and we'll talk about those here for the next few minutes. So one thing that you can do inside of the Xcode environment is you can modify the source code. Certainly you can open up any file in your project and you can change the code inside of your project. And so that's an important concept, and that's what developers do every day. They can add code to any source code file. So when we do that, we're just modifying the project itself. And so Xcode is a wonderful code editor. It allows us to edit source code files. Another thing that it allows us to do, and this is one of the most popular things to do, is to modify our project's properties. We can add icons and launch images and all kinds of different settings we can adjust so that when we compile the application with the run button, it behaves the way we would expect. A perfect example of that would be when we look at the home screen on this iPhone. In fact, let me get rid of a couple of these applications on the simulator so that we know what we're talking about here. When we compile an application, there is a small title underneath the icon on the phone itself. And so we used Xcode to set that title. I'm just going to delete all of these so we can go through this again. And when we set the title, we set the title in the Xcode project. Okay, so now we're back where we were. And let me show you here how we will set that title in using the Xcode environment. So let's say that we didn't want our application to be called Quick Scores, and we had it opened up in the Xcode environment. What we would do is we would choose the project itself over here on the left, and then we would go to build settings or info or build phases, and we would manipulate something about our project. So in this case, the title setting is in the info.plist, and right here where it says Quick Scores for the bundle display name, we could call this My Scores. And then when we recompiled the project and relaunched it on the simulator, we would have the new title appearing underneath the icon. And so that's just an example, My Scores. So that's just an example of how we can use Xcode to modify one simple property inside of our project. So Xcode is the compiler. Xcode is the integrated development environment, the code editor. We can use it for all different kinds of things. And it is the only tool that's available to install your creations on the simulator or on a device. Apple requires us to use Xcode. Don't get too intimidated by the way Xcode operates and behaves. It's much like lots of the other Apple OS X applications like iTunes and iPhotos. It's very graphically oriented, and all of the typical navigation buttons are available, and the menus, everything that you would expect to see in an Apple program. So Xcode is used to compile apps, or excuse me, to compile source code into applications.